Welcome back to ET with GOTB, the comeback of all comebacks for both Arsenal and Chelsea, as two English sides progress to the Champions League semi-finals. Let's get into it. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Welcome back to this extra bonus episode. Plenty for us to have a quick chat about. It is going to be a shorter episode this week, but we thought we had to react to the Champions League results. But this is, of course, your reminder to make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, and make sure you follow us across all of our social media platforms at Girls on the Ball so you do not miss any of our coverage. Sophie, we thought we'd do a quick reaction pod to the quarterfinal matches yesterday and Wednesday, and we have had some comments from people saying, can't wait to hear about your pod tomorrow. And I was like, oh god, we better do a pod tomorrow. And we also promised to have a quick chat about the Sevens League and what that might look like as well, and what we know so far and what we think about it. So yeah, I guess we have to start with Arsenal 3, Real Madrid 0, Alessia Russo getting a brace and Mariona Caldente getting the goal there as well. We both thought that they could do it, but I'll be honest with you, at half-time, I was a little worried about the fact that it was 0-0. And I didn't realise how... So we were watching this game from up in the stands. We were very lucky to be in the box with Purcell as part of their Every Stain is Part of the Game campaign, which was really cool. Learned loads. But a different viewpoint for us. Yeah. And I didn't expect to be so into it. Like, I wanted Arsenal to go through it. I wanted as many English teams to get as far as possible in the Champions League final. But I was very stressed up until that, first 90 seconds of the second half.
We were all stressed, I think. Well, I wasn't. I was pretty calm beforehand, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because, it's do I tell them about my tube doors?
Go on.
So I have this superstition that when I'm getting on the tube, if the doors open right in front of where I'm standing, then it's going to be a good day. And it worked against Spain for England. And I got the same thing on the way to the Emirates on Wednesday evening. And I was like, this is going to be a good day. So I was perfectly calm.
It's amazing.
Superstitions.
It literally determines stuff in her life. Tube doors.
Yes. So it determines my mood, whether the tube doors open or not, because I know it's going to be a good day or a bad day. Anyway, beside the point, yes, I was pretty calm. I think I said last week, I thought they could overturn it. I think the first half was frustrating in the sense that they were playing so well. They were really intense from the beginning. The press was brilliant. The counter press was brilliant. They were finding the gaps down the flanks. Real Madrid were just kind of happy to sit back and try and absorb the pressure, which maybe was a bit of a weird idea. I guess I get it when you're 2-0 up, but when you have, because they couldn't call on Melanie Leupolz, so their midfield looked a little less stable and strong, and Athenea and Linda Caicedo just don't provide the kind of defensive responsibilities that you need. So I thought Arsenal were doing really well. They were getting into promising positions. It was just that final ball that was letting them down. It was just like a second off, or like bouncing in the wrong place.
Didn't it feel like it? It was like everything was a second off, or an inch too high, or an inch too far, or an inch too wide. And I think we've seen Arsenal in the past, including in this season, when things aren't going their way, they panic. So I was a bit like, oh God, because we'd all said, if they get an early goal, I really think they can turn this around. By halftime, we were like, well, shite, they haven't had the early goal. And then I started to think maybe they'll go down that way where they start going, it's not working, and they panic.
It would be so easy, but I think we've seen a couple of times this season where once they get in the flow, they can really turn things around. It was like that game, the game against Bayern at home, which was a mad game. The game against West Ham where they were 3-1 down, and they turned that around in a mad minute. And once they get there, once it starts working, and they really spotted that, I don't know what Real Madrid's left side were doing, but they spotted that weakness and they really went for the jugular. And Chloe Kelly's deliveries, we know what she's about with the deliveries. But Beth Mead, when she came on as well, really exploited that area. And Real Madrid just did nothing to close out that threat. They didn't shift anything. They just kept it going. Leah Williamson with a distribution straight down the right side of Arsenal. Chloe Kelly or Beth Mead into acres of space, send the ball into the box. Someone gets on the end of it. And when you have someone who was on fire like Alessia Russo was in that second half in particular, what a player.
I'd be
Like,
raging
what a
not
player.
going home with the match ball, because she technically scored 2 hat-tricks
Well,
and
sort of.
didn't actually, because she only got a brace, but she had the ball in the back of the net 4 times, and God, those offsides were so tight, but they, well done for spotting them. But I thought she looked like every time she touched the ball she was going to score, and I think when a player's in that kind of form, I feel like Arsenal's second half reminded me a bit of Chelsea. We'll get on to Chelsea's first half, where they just came out and just put their foot to the floor. And even when they went 3-2 up, they were still playing like, even when there was a couple of minutes to go, they were still like, foot to the floor, let's get another goal, goal.
Yeah, I was sitting there at the end, I think at the end of the game, and Caitlin Ford had it. They'd broken through Real Madrid again. I think it was down the leftist side. Caitlin Ford had it. And I was like, take it to the corner. You've got 90 seconds left. Just take it to the corner. And she tried to dribble into the box. And I was like, there's just like, sometimes like that game management side of things. I know we don't want to see it. Like, we don't often like to see it in the corner, but in those moments.
But we did see twice at the end of the first half and at the end of the second half that Real Madrid were still very dangerous on the counter.
Yeah, Linda, like you can't.
Van Domselaar had to pull off some really important. She didn't have a huge amount to do in the game.
Those 2 saves.
But those two saves in this first half, and then she had saves in the second half as well that were absolutely crucial. So what I've learned from this, and maybe because I was so unsure beforehand, and this is why, is that a 2-0 lead actually isn't that much. And you almost think you need to get the third goal, then you can sit back and
you said it as well. I think it's it allows for complacency when you can't really afford for complacency. And maybe that's too harsh a word, but I don't think it is. I think when you're 2-0 up, you basically think you won the try. And I think by the celebrations that Real Madrid had at home the week before, they were basically thought they had got this one in the bag. And I think that was only enhanced by the beating of Barcelona at the weekend. They were like, job done, we're there. And I think it's such a dangerous game to play, because you get 1 goal back and then you're under a whole load of pressure. And, Arsenal scored 2 in 3 minutes, and your whole game plan is ripped up. I do have problems with what the coach manager did. I don't really, and I can understand the first half and trying to absorb the pressure and pick them off with the 2 runners. But when your game plan goes so badly wrong, early stick doors in the second half, and you just really do nothing. I mean, Olga Carmona will be having nightmares about Chloe Kelly for a few. Like, she couldn't handle her in that second half. She needed some support. She needed someone put out there to help defend that left side of Real Madrid, and they just did nothing to solve it.
I think as well what this game and the next game we're going to talk about showed was big game players turning up. And obviously Alessia Russo had a superb game, one of the best games I've seen from her in a while. But, Ford, Kelly, Williamson, Van Domselaar, Kim Little, so many players really stood out, took the game by the scruff of the neck. It was like they were all on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet, and everyone understood the part they had to play. So,
can I just say something about Leah Williamson? Because I got a couple of comments about putting her in the team of the week this week, in the Barclays WSL team of the week. And I was thinking about this during this game. I was like, she touches the ball more than any other central defender. She is probably one of the best ball playing central defenders out there at the moment. And she makes the most passes and the most progressive passes consistently every Arsenal game of anyone on the field generally. And I think the problem with her is because she is that last line of defence in a way, well, other than the goalkeeper, when she makes a mistake, it's quite evident that she's made, like when her pass goes astray and it's cut out. But she completes so many other passes and causes so much more influential play going forward, that I think that, the headline is caught by the mistake, but actually it negates everything else she does. And if you're going to touch the ball and pass the ball more than anyone else in the field, you're going to make more mistakes than anyone else in the field, quite naturally, right?
What I find funny about the comments we sometimes get about our team of the week, like someone was like, Carolyn, what about Cuthbert and Aggie Beaver-Jones? And you're like, well, they don't play in the same position. So if you've got an issue with certain players being left out, you should question the players that are in that position.
Well, Aggie did in that game, didn't she, against City? She played down the right.
But But like Carolyn had a superb. Cuthbert doesn't play in that position, and I just find it funny when people go, "This player, what about this player in an entirely different position?" And you're like, "Well, they're not like for like." But also,
like it's subjective as well. My point is about Leah Williamson is that I think because she's on the ball more than most, she will inevitably make an extra mistake compared to most, and sometimes because she's the last line of defence, it's the most obvious one. When others are probably making more mistakes.
Yeah, but also a lot of the comments we get are based on club allegiances.
Yeah.
Not actually based on, Anyway, I do think that was one of Arsenal's best performances we've seen from them in a while. They will be facing just Lyon, who beat Bayern Munich 6-1 on aggregate. So that is going to be a tall order. I know you said to me when I was like, Jesus, they have to face Lyon and they beat Bayern Munich 6-1. You're like, yeah, but they beat them 5-0. And I was like, that was like 2 seasons ago.
I'm just not fazed by it.
Great.
Yes.
You be unfazed, I'll be
Lyon
fazed.
are a brilliant football team, but I think there's going to be so many elements that come into this game. It's Joe Montemurro return. Like there's some players on that team who know him as much as he knows them. They know him as well. And they played him. Well, I mean, there was a return when they played Juve, and he was in control. They know what he's about as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of small narratives within a bigger picture of the game. I do think because they play at home first, don't they? So I do think that's a bit of a disadvantage. I always prefer having the home leg second.
Okay.
But I am not nearly as like fearing it as you seem to be.
Okay.
I also think there is, and we'll come onto it, a bit of a problem with German football at the moment.
Okay. Entirely different conversation.
No, I know, but like when you're looking at the aggregate scorelines.
Speaking of a 2-0 deficit to overcome, speaking of when you were nervous, and there was no need to be apparently if you're a Chelsea fan, because this was one of Chelsea's best performances that I've seen from them. I texted you and I said, Chelsea have found fifth gear. You know when you're driving, like say our car, and you put the accelerator down slow and you start to speed up. And then sometimes with newer cars, when you press them, it kind of goes boom, like that. That was Chelsea. They just pressed it and suddenly they were like boom, ahead. And I think for me, it was evident of a team that has been set up and built to go far in as many competitions as possible versus a team that hasn't been set up and built to go as far as possible in as many competitions as possible. And hold on, City fans might come to me for that, but Gareth Taylor literally said we're not built to go far in multiple competitions. So
I mean, you can't look at that and yes, City have a huge injury problem
and that isn't a reason, thing to talk about.
It's a reason to talk about. They're not at full strength. They weren't with Bunny Shaw and she changes games. And Fabinho, as we saw in that League Cup game, changes games. Greenwood, Hemp, yes, you've got some really, really big players out. So do Chelsea, but Chelsea...
Even Chiara Keating coming in.
But Chelsea have the depth. And
the quality and depth.
I think if you are a team who is wanting to establish yourself at the top of women's football domestically, and that means you have to go far into competitions. You then have to build a squad to be able to go far in competitions.
You don't wait till you're in them to build them.
Yeah, and to have 4 outfield players on the bench and 1 goalkeeper shows a kind of a lack of planning, I think, a little bit. Because I think we said it last year, we said it this year, they recruit really, really good, high quality players. They just don't recruit enough of them. And it has to be a shift of the mentality behind the scenes, I think. If they really are, which they should be, aiming to be in the Champions League, to be going to semi-finals and finals, then they need to build a team where you have enough players to like cover the gaps when there is an injury crisis. And at the moment, the only squad that can do that is Chelsea.
To be fair, Man City fans, you still have the FA Cup, and you'll probably end up facing Chelsea in that.
Please no, I'm so done. I'm not that I don't want Man City in the FA Cup final. I just don't want that game again for a long time.
Part 5, bonus episode. We're bringing it back. No, that'll be an interesting one to look at. No, but I also I saw some people like comparing Man City to Real Madrid. And hang on, I do think. Like, again, I saw City fans being like, we've not set up to defend the lead. You had set up to defend the lead. Miedema in the midfield immediately tells you that you're setting up to...
They sat deep in the first half.
Which is fine, and I totally get that. But they created more than Real Madrid did.
Yeah, no.
And they improved in the second half.
So I was actually looking at the stats in the first half, and maybe the vibe in the stadium was very different to what you saw on TV because it felt so intense from Chelsea.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the stats and I was like, yes, Chelsea are, winning on every single stat pretty much, but it's not by as much as it felt on the field. And I think it just felt live in person, like it was a relentless wave of attack after attack in that first half. Bar 5 minutes after Chelsea scored their first goal, where City came out a bit and pushed up about 10 yards higher. It felt like Chelsea were just like a juggernaut, and they were just, Mira Ramirez was giving Alexandria nightmares, and Gracie Pryor, who has performed unbelievably in the last 4 games. But she had a tough night last night.
What a baptism of fire, though!
Yeah,
to be playing the top team in the country 4 times.
Yeah, definitely. She's done really, really well, but she had a tough night last night. Kirsten Kasparov was turned inside out by Lauren James. Not for the it happened on Sunday as well. And then down the other side, JRK Ritin Canarid wasn't having the best game productivity wise, but she was causing Leila Wahabi all kinds of bother with her speed and her running, and you could just see even 25 minutes in, Leila was just a bit puffing away because she was just having to deal with that kind of relentless. And I think that was the thing about Chelsea, they were so relentless. And then you have the Terriers in midfield. I thought the choice to pick Vika captain, my eyebrows were raised at the beginning because I was a bit like, oh, that's interesting. Wonder why she's done that. But her and Cuthbert were just so dogged and tenacious, kept running and running and running. I thought for a 19-year-old captain, performed absolutely brilliantly, and I'm sure her stats will show that she was absolutely crucial to breaking up anything that City did trying to come forward.
Can I go back though to what I was saying about City didn't sit back or whatever? To be fair, the possession was almost 50-50. Almost. I think Chelsea just edged it. When you look at stats like chances created, shots on goal, touches in the opposition box, it was almost double for Chelsea than it was for City.
Of the game.
Yes,
but not at halftime. So.
No, so I'm talking about at the end of the game. So there was an element, I think, of maybe Chelsea dropping down into 4th gear in the second half. But I do also think City improved in the second half and pushed because at the end of the day, they only needed 1 goal to take it to extra time.
That was the same with Real Madrid as well. They needed 1 goal, and that's why it got really nervy at the end, even though it felt like Arsenal had completely controlled that half of football. There was just always that inkling that,
Yeah, and Nick Cushing said when he was asked about his squad selection and that, he spoke about a desire to sustain intensity and to sustain, to essentially be staying in the game. And by having Miedema deep first, he knew that Parker Coombs could come onto the pitch, and then you could push a Miedema up into the number 9, which I understood. You do also have to factor in, you've got a player like Miedema who does need to be managed, and she's now become the player that you're hugely relying on to turn a game. So that's another thing that Nick Cushing has to think about. Now they've got another game against Brighton. So, but I do think, players that stood out for Chelsea, LJ, Cuthbert, captain, you spoke about. Johanna Reithen-Canarid is having maybe not as good a season as she's had in the past, because in the past she's maybe been more effective in front of goal or produced more. But she's so dangerous, and I feel like in the last couple of games especially, she's turned it around a little bit. She
stretches the play so
She's
well.
A bit too unselfish at times.
But there was, and it was just not taking your chances. There was an opportunity, she broke into the box. You could just tell she wasn't quite confident with it, because she'd hit it for... Normally you would want to hit it first time, and she just took 2 extra touches. Yeah. And it allowed Keating, in the end, it just rolled straight through to Keating to make the save.
But a superb performance from Chelsea all around. I think, again, it's those game changers stepping up at key moments. Players like a Lucy Bronze who can really take the game by the scruff of the neck and just have an attitude going in that we're going to absolutely...
No, she didn't even bring on Hamana, for example. So they have that depth, and Sam Kerr is meant to come back after the international break for the Barcelona game. She's in the squad as well.
Speaking of, it's Barcelona again. This has become the Arsenal Wolfsburg / Chelsea Wolfsburg repeat edition.
Season in a row.
Yeah, and Barcelona clearly struggled in their quarterfinal. They only beat Wolfsburg 10-2 on aggregate. So those 2 games, Lyon v Bayern Munich, Barcelona v Wolfsburg. Concerning, not great to be having those scorelines at this stage of the competition.
Isn't it a bit embarrassing if you're Wolfsburg?
No, but we were looking at these quarterfinals going, these are big, meaty, tasty. You've got like powerhouses of the game in these quarterfinals, and that was a real surprise to see those scorelines.
But that's my point a bit maybe about German football, which someone more schooled on German football than me can probably delve into. But I do think that to be, certainly for Wolfsburg, to be losing 10-2 in aggregate to Barcelona is a sign that something isn't quite right with what's happening at Wolfsburg in terms of the European stage. And I know Bayern Munich, they're good in the league. They do well in the cups. But I still think that just those heavy aggregate scores just points to maybe something not being quite right in terms of being able to keep up with the very best of in European football. And I think, yes, we'll soon see how Arsenal and Chelsea do against them. But if Chelsea last season, beat Barcelona away, and it was like the scores have never been that heavy.
This was going to be my question. Playing devil's advocate, if we're sitting here after the semi-finals and both English sides have been heavily beaten,
I would say it would be an embarrassment if it was an English team.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm intrigued.
I don't think you can go to the semi-finals or quarterfinals and lose 10-2 on aggregate. I just think that's just a sign of real weakness.
Okay. Well, they're going to be super exciting games. Looking forward to both of them. Great to see two English teams in the semi-finals. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh my God, an English final is on." It's like, lads, you've got some hurdles to get over first, right? Let's just
But I think it's going to be actually really, really fun, to be honest, because I think both teams, Arsenal certainly getting into the semi-finals is a big win for their season. And I think a final appearance would be, if they can get past Lyon, would be a massive bonus. But I think when you think about where they started the season,
well, everyone forgets that,
and where they are now, to be in the semi-finals of Europe is pretty big. And whatever happens, they can take that away. So the kind of pressure, the pressure's on, but it's also a bit off of it.
Right. For Chelsea, though,
they're desperate to win
dream.
It. That's the thing. That's what they built their squad around. But then you also have the thing that it's Sonia's first season as well. So, there's a lot. That I think it's just going to be a fun 2 weeks of football, to be honest. Yes, stressful. I'm sure for the fans of Chelsea and Arsenal, it's going to be incredibly stressful. But I think for the neutral, we want the English teams to go through, obviously, but it's going to be just quite a fun.
But also for the Chelsea and Arsenal fans, your teams sound and feel really confident, so that's good. Yeah, it's a good sign. Yes, looking forward to that one. Okay, we're going to finish off very quickly with a quick chat on the World Sevens football. Now, Tom Gary from The Guardian did a very good Q&A article on this about, what we know so far, etc. So do give that a read. But some kind of main pointers on this. It is $100 million seven-a-side series. The $100 million put in for the next 5 years, I believe. 7v7 with a $5 million prize pot with $2.5 million going to the winning team. 30-minute long games, so 50-minute halves with rolling subs, smaller pitches, smaller goals, 2 groups of 4. And I believe you can have a full squad, but your match day squad is 14. Mm-hmm. No teams confirmed yet, but Champions League finalists will not be eligible, understandably, because it is taking place in that week leading up to the Champions League final, which I kind of don't appreciate because that was actually a week off we were taking, but conveniently we were taking it in Portugal. So sorry to my mum and stepdad who are coming with us on holiday, but we might be dragging you up to Lisbon a couple of times. So it's unclear from how the remaining teams will be chosen yet, which is something I'm going to touch on. It's an invitational, so it will be different teams each tournament, with it changing location around the world as well. So you'll have some might be more European focused, some might be South American focused, or Americas focused, for example. And the aim is to avoid clashes with domestic teams and their leagues. So going to do a bit of a pros and cons from my perspective so far. We'll start with the pros. It's something new. It's thinking outside the box. We saw the success of the Sevens rugby in the Olympics and how well that did and how that has bled over into 15s. Just got to think of Alona Mar, Bristol Bears. And I guess, they're hoping that this is going to end up with high scoring games, real flair on show, skills, tactically, kind of technically, an exciting product. And we've talked a lot about how women's football doesn't always have to follow the men's road. So here's an example of something that could be done slightly different. Pro?
Yes, definitely pro. I think for me, we always talk about out of the box thinking, and sometimes we don't agree with it, understandably. But I think something like this, which is a completely kind of new product, never been tried before in terms of women's football, has the money behind it to be quite a good incentive. I think in terms of like the product that you can produce from that, the content, the clips, the showing off of players, the building of the story, it's got so many possibilities around it that it could only I think it's a positive for the sport.
Okay. Con, why now? Why May? Why is the Euros one the first one you're doing? I appreciate you're doing it around the Champions League final. There's going to be a lot of buzz in Lisbon. There's going to be a lot of people in Lisbon around the women's game. But it's a Euros year. So many players are going to be potentially involved in a Euros that summer. And that was one of the few opportunities for players to have a bit of a rest. Now, some people have said in return, you can bring a squad of 30, you only use 14 for a game, you can roll on, roll off subs, it's only 15-minute halves. Being in camp is not a break. And I think players do need the opportunity to switch off. If you're lucky enough not to be in an FA Cup final and not to be in a Champions League final, maybe you get a couple of weeks there. But I just think for players who are involved in either of those, well, the Champions League final different, someone involved in the FA Cup final, then having to come and do this, you've then got an England game the following week. Once you're in the England game, you're essentially going to be in camp. They might get weekends off, but I just feel like there is an opportunity to maybe not do this right before the Euros, and you could have done it, say, the first one in November.
I agree. I think they've chosen this one purely from a commercial and selling standpoint. I think there's going to be one NWSL team potentially in it, but you're going to have the best teams in Europe playing, so the biggest stars on show in terms of the European powerhouses. I think in the whole idea, building up to a Champions League final, is to be in the city where that is, feed off that buzz and kind of create something different. But I agree. The concern is that the commercial has taken over the kind of the player side of things a little bit.
Which leads me into the next pro, though, because...
Can I just add to that, though?
Go on. As long as you don't give away anything.
No, but the one thing I would say to that is you're seeing it more and more likely that clubs will use that window because they don't have to let go of their players until the end of the Champions League final. So there will be training and there will be in the squad, and most likely you'll have someone like an Arsenal take them off on a post-season tour somewhere.
I knew you were going to say that, and they did Australia last time, but they didn't bring the whole squad to Australia.
No, well, I know, but they might not. I mean, we don't know what it's going to look like, do they? Do we? We didn't know what I disagreed with the Australia thing, but I just think that in all likelihood that is going to start getting more prevalent, those kind of post-season tours. This is just maybe an actually easier way. If the European teams would just going to Portugal, it stops them having to fly around the world.
Still not like it. Former players are involved, including those already involved and invested in the women's game, which I think is important because it shows that they're in it because they care about women's football, particularly ex-pros. I would like to think are thinking about things like congestion and loading. Jennifer Maxey, is that how you pronounce her name? Maxey, co-owner of Gotham FC, is the one, I believe, investing that $100 million. Yeah. So I do feel like it gives a tournament like this a little bit more legitimacy. It's not like FIFA should be legitimate because it's a governing body, but it's not a FIFA going, let's do more tournaments where there's more money and more tournaments, and it doesn't feel as much like that. So I guess there's some that gives it some positives.
I think Jennifer herself, she obviously is the co-owner of Gotham, so she has an interest in the game. It's not like she's some, I don't know, investment person who's just
no idea
seen a concept. Yeah, she is literally legitimately invested in the game, and yes, she has a lot of money and has pledged a lot of money. Unfortunately, I know people question money a fair bit, but for the game to grow, we need money, and I think you need investment. So until I've seen the negative side of it, I don't want to poo-poo an idea, if you know what I mean, because it's trying to bring eyeballs onto a game. I think when I look at that player panel, when you see the likes of Anita Asante and Tobin Heath, all players who I have a lot of respect for, both in their careers and how they stood up and protected the game, and how they're doing it post career as well. I think they're in pretty good hands in that respect, because they will know what it's what it's about being a player and kind of the safeguards that are needed to make it, a really proper tournament. And there's a real potential from it.
Con, how are they choosing the teams? Is it going to be a popularity contest? Is it going to be a case of just getting the best teams in the top leagues and you end up having the rich getting richer? Or is it going to be an opportunity to bring a Leicester, bring a, Real Sociedad, I don't know, teams that maybe don't get many eyeballs on
or as
much
much
money?
I think, we don't know yet, but I would imagine in the first one, they want to go big.
Mm-hmm.
Go big or go home. Just because it's about the first one, you want to get all of the eyeballs on it as possible. But given that they're changing the teams every time and, the November one won't be able, European teams won't be able to compete in it, I think, because they're in season. So that's going to be, your Central American teams, South American teams, maybe, who can compete more. Then you're probably looking at going to Asia. It's about bringing the game to new areas of the world as well, or bringing focus. The game's being played in those areas of the world, bringing focus in different areas of the world. And if they are truthfully moving around the globe, selecting different teams every time, it's not just going to be, Chelsea, Barcelona every time. It's going to be.
But could it be that every European time? That's what I'd like to avoid.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah.
That
would be, that's one to be answered. Yes, it's one to be wary of, but one to be answered later down the line. I do think the whole point about the rugby sevens is a big one in terms of the opportunity. I would also look at the unrivaled league, the 3x3 basketball, that has been going on in America before the start of the WNBA season. I think they've seen some really positive effects from that, both in terms of the success of Unrivaled as a brand and as a product, but in terms of I think now the WNBA have put in maternity leave and stuff like that into their player contracts on the back of Unrivaled leading the way in some respects in terms of player welfare and stuff like that. So I do think you could see, there's an real opportunity there for one to have a positive effect on the other. It might not happen, but it's just a potential.
Love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think. Concerns, worries, things you like, what excites you about it. Let us know in the comments. Something that we can definitely going to learn more about pretty quickly because it is coming up thick and fast.
6 weeks.
Yeah, which is crazy. So looking forward to seeing what it ends up being. That's it from us. We will be back again early next week with our next episode. We will do a live on Instagram tomorrow too, so do join us there if you are free. Enjoy the footy this weekend and we'll chat to you again very soon.